Some men find out their children have turned on them with a slammed door. I found out with silence. 3 days of it. And let me tell you something about silence when it comes from your own blood. It doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like drowning in a room full of air. You want to know what it's like to build your entire life around 2 little girls, to pour every ounce of yourself into making sure they never wanted for anything, and then stand on a porch in Texas while one of them looks at you like you're a stranger who wandered in off the street. I'll tell you exactly what it's like. It's like watching everything you built collapse in real time, except you're the one who has to keep standing there and take it. My name is Daniel Whitfield. I'm 54 years old. I run a structural engineering firm out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Whitfield and Associates. Bridges, parking structures, the bones underneath buildings that everybody walks through without ever thinking about the math that keeps the whole thing from falling down. I built that company from a card table in my garage to 40 employees, and I built it so my daughters would never know what it felt like to go without. My own father left when I was 9. Just gone. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over us, a diner in the morning, a cleaning service in the afternoon, and she did other people's books at night after we were asleep. I used to lie awake and listen to her crying quietly in the kitchen when she thought nobody could hear. I made myself a promise back then, lying in that bed listening to my mother fall apart in the next room. I promised myself that if I ever had children, they would never once feel that kind of empty. They would never lie awake wondering if there'd be enough. I kept that promise for 27 years. Every birthday party rented out at the skating rink instead of just cake in the backyard. Every dance recital costume Renee sewed by hand because I insisted on paying for the good dance studio instead of the cheap one 3 towns over. Every single one of Sophie's soccer tournaments, and I coached half of those teams myself on weekends even after 60-hour work weeks, because I refused to be the kind of father who watched from a folding chair when he could be standing on the field. Emily's college tuition, paid in full, no loans, no gaps, because I remembered exactly what it felt like watching my own mother count out crumpled bills at a kitchen table, trying to figure out which bill could wait another week. I promised myself neither of my daughters would ever sit at a table like that. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, that promise turned into the worst week of my entire life. Welcome to Karma's Door. Sit with this one, because it's not a story about a misunderstanding. It's a story about 2 grown women who knew exactly what they were doing to their own father and chose to do it anyway. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from, because trust me, you are going to want to see how this one ends. It started with a phone call I didn't even think twice about making. My younger daughter, Sophie, is 24. I co-signed her auto loan 2 years back, when she landed her first real job outside of Austin, Texas, doing marketing for some tech startup. Good girl, hard worker, but her credit was thin back then, fresh out of college, so my name went on the paperwork right next to hers. That's what fathers do. That's what I thought fathers were supposed to do. Her bank sent a notice that the loan was up for a refinance review, needed my signature updated within the week, or the whole thing would default back to a higher rate. And knowing Sophie, that would have wrecked her budget for the next 3 years. Small thing, a 10-minute phone call to confirm some paperwork with her, and then I'd handle it with the bank myself. I called her from my office on a Tuesday morning, half watching one of my engineers run load calculations on a parking structure we were retrofitting downtown. Straight to voicemail. Hey Soph, it's Dad. Bank sent something about your car loan refinance. Need to check a detail with you before I sign off. Call me when you get a sec. No rush. No rush. I actually said no rush. If I'd known what was coming, I don't think I would have been so relaxed about it. By the next afternoon, nothing. I called again. Voicemail again. Now here's the thing about Sophie. She doesn't always pick up right away. She's 24. She's got a life. I understand that. But a full day of nothing? That wasn't like her. So I called her older sister Emily, 27, figuring she'd know if Sophie was just buried in work or out of town for something. Voicemail, both of them, same day. I told myself it was nothing. Kids get busy. I left another message, kept my voice light even though something in my gut had already started tightening up. Girls, I really need one of you to call me back. It's about Sophie's car loan. There's a deadline coming up. Just give me a ring. My wife Renee noticed something was wrong with me that night at dinner. 29 years of marriage, She can read a shift in my face before I even feel it myself. "You've barely touched your plate," she said. "What's going on with you?" "The girls aren't answering," I told her. "Either of them. Since yesterday." She waved it off the way any reasonable person would. "They're grown women, Daniel. They've got their own lives." She was right. I knew she was right. So why did I feel like something was crawling around under my skin all night? Day 3 is when it stopped being an annoyance and started being terror. The refinance deadline was now 48 hours out. I called Sophie 6 times that day. 6. I called Emily 4 times. Every single one died in a voicemail box. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw car wrecks on I-35. I saw 2 Texas state troopers standing on my porch with their hats in their hands, and I swear to God I could hear the words before they ever said them out loud. "You've buried people you loved before, Daniel. You know exactly how fast this world takes someone away from you. Quiet. Sudden. No warning." I sat on the edge of the bed at 1 in the morning, phone in my hand, thumb hovering over Sophie's name for what felt like the 100th time. Renee sat up behind me. "Daniel, come to bed. Something is wrong," I said, and my voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard from myself since my mother's funeral. 3 days. Neither one of them. That is not busy. That is not normal. Maybe they're together somewhere. Maybe their phones died. Both phones? For 3 straight days? She looked at me, and I watched that same cold drop hit her face too. "Pack a bag," I said. "We're driving down there. Something is wrong. I can feel it in my bones." She didn't argue. That's the thing 29 years of marriage teaches you. Which fights are worth having, and which ones you just get up and pack a bag for. We left before sunrise, 8 hours down to Austin, and I want you to understand something about that drive, because I have relived every single mile of it since. I ran every scenario through my head like some sick highlight reel nobody asked for. A wreck on the highway, a break-in at Sophie's apartment, something with Emily's car, that little sedan she'd been driving since college, with brakes I always told her needed looking at. I pictured every version of tragedy a father's mind can invent, over 8 hours on the interstate, and none of it, prepared me for what was actually waiting on the other side of that door. Somewhere around Denton, I made Renee pull over so I could throw up on the side of the road. 29 years married to me, and she'd never once seen that happen, not even the day my own mother died. I stood there on the shoulder, with 18-wheelers roaring past, hands braced on my knees, and I remember thinking, very clearly, that if something had actually happened to one of my girls, I did not know how a man was supposed to keep breathing after that. I got back in the truck. I didn't say anything about it. Renee didn't ask. She just reached over and put her hand on the back of my neck for a second, the way she does, and we kept driving. I called the Highway Patrol non-emergency line somewhere past Waco, just to ask if there'd been any accidents reported involving either of my daughter's vehicles in the last 3 days. The dispatcher was kind about it, told me they had no way to search by name without a report number, but nothing matching the description I gave had come across their desk. It should have made me feel better. It didn't. It just meant the explanation, whatever it was still out there waiting for me, and I had 4 more hours of driving before I'd know what it was. We rolled into Austin a little after 4 in the afternoon. Renee kept saying the same thing on a loop the whole drive, like she was trying to convince herself. "They're fine. They're probably just fine, Daniel. There's some boring explanation." "Then why won't they answer the phone?" I said, gripping the wheel harder than I needed to. 10 calls between us. Not one text back. Not one. She went quiet after that. I think some part of her already knew, same as some part of me knew, that boring explanation was not what was waiting for us. We pulled up outside Sophie's apartment complex, and that's when I heard it before we even got out of the car. Music, laughter, string lights strung up along the patio railing. That is not the sound of tragedy. For half a second, relief flooded through me so hard my knees actually went weak. Thank God. Thank God they're okay. We walked up. I knocked. The music dipped. Footsteps. The door swung open, and there was my daughter Sophie, drink in her hand, a grin frozen halfway between surprise and something far colder. Something I hadn't seen on her face since she was 16, and got caught sneaking back in past curfew. That grin didn't stay confused for long. It curdled into something else entirely. What are you guys doing here? Not Dad. Not is everything okay? What are you guys doing here? Like we were a couple of strangers she'd have to figure out how to get rid of. I tried to keep my voice steady even though my whole chest felt like it was folding in on itself. I've been calling you for 3 days, Sophie. You didn't answer. I thought something happened to you. Renee pushed past me a step, hands flying up to her mouth, and for 1 second I watched 27 years of motherhood pour out of her all at once. Oh, thank God. Sophie, you're okay. We have been calling and calling. We were sick with worry. We thought something terrible. Sophie cut her off before she even finished the sentence. She rolled her eyes, not a small eye roll, a full, dramatic, exhausted, I cannot believe I have to deal with this eye roll. We didn't answer because we didn't want to talk to you, she said, voice sharp and flat and final. Stop calling us. We have our own lives. You're suffocating us. Just stay on your own. Stay on your own. 4 words. I have been hit by a lot of things in my life. A steel beam that got away from a crane operator on a job site once, cracked 2 of my ribs. My own father walking out when I was 9 years old. None of it landed the way those 4 words landed standing on my daughter's doorstep. I stood there in that hallway, string lights glowing behind Sophie's head like the whole night was mocking me, and I genuinely did not have words. 27 years. Every scraped knee, every science fair project built at midnight, every college tuition payment made on time without her ever having to think twice about it. And this is the return. Before I could even find something to say, a young man stepped up beside her. Sophie's boyfriend, Trent, arms sliding around her waist like he was staking a claim on the whole conversation. Honestly, he said, it's a lot. Do you guys ever stop hovering? Renee blinked at him, completely lost. I'm sorry. Who exactly are you? Sophie's smile widened, and she held up her left hand like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. There was no ring on it, but she gestured toward the apartment behind her, toward boxes stacked along the entryway. Trent and I are moving in together. Tonight's our lease signing party, which you are currently interrupting by showing up uninvited. Uninvited. Interrupting. I heard the words land, but for a second they didn't fully register, like my brain refused delivery on a package it already knew would hurt too much to open. Our daughter, moving in with a man we'd never even heard of, and we found out standing on a doorstep being told we were ruining the celebration. I want to pause right here, because this is the part where somebody who's never lived through it would say, Daniel, just walk away, don't make a scene. And believe me, part of me was already halfway back to the car in my head. But another part of me, the part that had driven 8 hours because I genuinely believed my daughters might be in danger, that part needed to understand. How does a father go from, he's calling because he loves us, to, he's suffocating us, without a single conversation in between? I found out real quick, because that's when my older daughter Emily walked out onto that patio, and I swear to God, seeing her face made it worse, not better. Oh my God, are you serious right now? Emily groaned, actually groaned, like we were an inconvenience she thought she'd already dealt with. You guys couldn't just let us have one night? Something steadied inside me right then. Fear was turning into something else. I don't know if it was anger yet. Maybe it was just clarity. Emily, I said, keeping my voice level, your sister's auto loan refinance is due in 2 days. I'm the co-signer. I needed to confirm a detail before I sign off on it so her rate doesn't triple. I called her. Then I called you. Neither one of you answered for 3 straight days. Emily let out a laugh. Short, mocking, a laugh with no actual humor in it, just contempt wearing humor's jacket. Oh, here we go. The savior complex again. She shook her head slow, like she was talking to a child, instead of the man who had paid for every single one of her orthodontist appointments. You think because your name's on a piece of paper you get to track every move we make. This is exactly why we both moved 400 miles from home, Dad. We picked Austin on purpose, to get away from you. 400 miles, on purpose, to get away from me. I drove 8 hours because I loved them too much to sit still. They moved 400 miles because they loved me too little to stay close. Sophie nodded along like her sister had just delivered some kind of sermon, then leaned back against the doorframe, drink still in her hand. Exactly, she said. You always use money and fixing things just to keep tabs on us and feel important. I've got my own job. I don't need you hovering over me, acting like some kind of hero. She paused, and here's the part that really cracks something open in my chest. We saw your calls, Dad. We purposely didn't answer. We wanted to see how long it would take you to finally get the hint and stay on your own. Purposely. Not we were busy. Not our phones died. Purposely. For 3 days I sat awake picturing every possible danger my daughters could be in. And the entire time, they were sitting in an apartment in Austin, watching my name light up their screens, and deciding, on purpose, to let their own father suffer, just to teach him a lesson. Trent tossed his hair back, clearly bored of the whole exchange by now. Yeah, look, we're trying to celebrate something good here, with people who actually matter. We don't need the old-school parent drama tonight. He gestured down the hallway toward the elevator, like he was shooing off a delivery driver. Please leave. Please leave. In my own daughter's doorway, from a man I had met 4 minutes earlier. I want you to understand something about me, because it matters for everything that comes after this moment. I didn't yell. I've thought about that a lot since, whether I should have raised my voice, whether some part of them needed to see me break the way they'd just broken their mother. But that's not who I am. My own father never gave me the chance to learn how to handle a moment like that. I had to figure it out myself. Standing right there in that hallway, string lights glowing behind my daughters' heads like some cruel party decoration mocking the whole thing, I looked at the 2 women I had poured my entire life into. The women I vowed to protect the second I held them in a hospital room in Tulsa, because I knew exactly what it felt like to grow up without somebody protecting you. They stood there in a life my signature and my credit had helped build, completely blind to it, treating their own mother like something to be swept off a doorstep. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached over, took my silently crying wife's hand, and turned toward the elevator. Behind us, I heard Trent mutter something to Sophie. I didn't catch the words. Honestly, I didn't need to. The tone said enough. They wanted to be on their own. And soon enough, they were going to get exactly what they asked for. If you've been with me a while, you know what's coming next isn't yelling, isn't a scene, isn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It's just consequences finally being allowed to land where they were always supposed to land. Hit like, drop a comment, let me know where you're watching this from, because you are going to want to see how far this went. The elevator ride down felt longer than the entire 8-hour drive down from Tulsa. Renee stood beside me, silent, staring at the mirrored doors, tears running down her face without a single sound coming out of her. I've seen my wife cry plenty of times in 29 years. At her own father's funeral, at both girls' high school graduations. I had never seen her cry like that, silent, hollow, like something inside her had simply stopped working. We didn't speak in the parking garage. We didn't speak on the highway heading back out of Austin, even though I kept glancing over, waiting for her to say something, anything, just so I'd know she was still in there with me. She finally spoke somewhere past the city limits, staring out at the darkening highway, like it might have an answer for her. 20 years, she said quietly. I've had your mother's wedding china packed up and wrapped in that hutch for 20 years, Daniel. I always told myself, whichever one of them gets married first, that china goes to her. I imagined telling her the story behind it. Your mother carrying those plates through 3 different apartments after your father left, never once selling them even when money was tight, because she said a woman deserves something beautiful in her house, even when everything else is falling apart. Her hands were shaking in her lap, and I just watched our daughter's boyfriend tell us to leave a party we didn't even know was happening. What do you say to that? What is there to say? I reached over and took her hand off her lap and held it the rest of the drive home. 8 hours, mostly silence, Oklahoma flatland rolling by in the dark. I've sat through some quiet hours in my life. That drive was the quietest. They didn't mean it as a joke. They meant every word. They told us themselves. They'd planned it, watched the calls come in, and chose silence on purpose. They're just going through a phase, people say. 24 and 27 is not a phase. That's a grown decision made in full daylight, with a boyfriend cheering it on from the doorway. Somewhere past the Oklahoma line, staring at the dark highway in front of me, something shifted inside my chest, quiet but permanent. Like a door closing somewhere deep in a house I thought I knew every room of. I gave them everything I never had. Every scraped knee, every tuition payment, every ounce of protection a boy without a father spends his whole life dreaming about giving his own kids someday. And somehow, in giving them all of that, I raised two women who look at me like I'm the villain in their story. By the time we pulled into our own driveway in Tulsa, something in me had already made a decision, even though I didn't have words for it yet. I just knew the man walking through that front door wasn't the same one who'd left terrified for his daughter's lives 8 hours earlier. That man was gone, and whatever was left of him was about to make some phone calls his daughters would remember for a long, long time. They wanted to be left alone, so I decided to leave them alone. Legally, financially, completely. And by the time they figured out what that actually meant, it was already too late to undo it. You know what nobody tells you about heartbreak? It doesn't announce itself right away. It waits. It lets you walk through your own front door first. Lets you set your keys down. Lets you think, for one merciful second, that maybe the worst of it is behind you. And then it takes your wife's legs right out from under her. We walked into that house a little after midnight, and the silence hit different than it ever had before. 29 years in that house. Countless nights coming home from dance recitals, from school plays, from every ordinary moment that used to fill those rooms with noise. That night, the quiet had teeth. Renee made it 2 steps past the front hall before her knees just gave out. She went down onto the kitchen floor, the same kitchen where she taught both our girls how to make her mother's pot roast, where she'd stood over that stove 1,000 Sunday afternoons, and she cried the way you cry when someone dies. Not the composed, dignified crying she'd done in that hallway in front of strangers. The real thing, the kind that comes from somewhere underneath your ribs. I got down on that floor with her, didn't try to fix it, which, if you know me, is a small miracle in itself, because fixing things is the only language I've ever really known how to speak. I just held her while she cried into my shoulder, and I let myself ask the question that had been chasing me the whole drive home. Where did we go wrong? I gave them everything I never had, I said quietly, more to myself than to her. I was there for every single moment. I was the father I always wished I'd had, and somehow, in doing that, I turned them into people who look at me like I'm the enemy. Renee lifted her head, eyes red and swollen, and said the only thing that made any sense that whole night. No, Daniel, you didn't turn them into anything. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. They did that themselves. You just handed them a life they never had to work for, and people who never have to work for something never learn to be grateful for it. I held my wife on that kitchen floor until almost 1 in the morning, and somewhere in there, I made myself a promise. The only person who had stood by me through every version of my life, good, bad, terrified, exhausted, was lying right there in my arms. My daughters had their own lives now. They'd made that painfully, deliberately clear. So I decided right then that I was going to honor that wish, and I was going to spend whatever time I had left protecting the one person who had actually earned it. We didn't sleep much that night. We talked, really talked. The kind of conversation 29 years of marriage lets you have without needing to explain half of it. We agreed on one thing above everything else. Whatever happened next, we would move together. No solo decisions. No guilt trips down memory lane that would soften either one of us at the wrong moment. By sunrise, we were aligned. And a man aligned with his wife is not somebody you want standing between you and a phone. I called my attorney, Marcus Ball, at exactly 8:02 the next morning. He's handled the firm's contracts for almost 20 years, and he knows the difference between me calling about a construction dispute and me calling about something else entirely. This was clearly something else. Daniel, he said, you sound like a man who didn't sleep. I need to withdraw my co-signature from Sophie's auto loan, I told him. Today, before the refinance window closes. And I need to send formal written notice ending my role as guarantor on Emily's apartment lease renewal. That one's coming up in 3 weeks. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause a good lawyer gives you when he wants to make sure you're not about to do something you'll regret by lunchtime. You're sure about this? Once that loan reprices without your backing, the bank's system flags it automatically. No warning period on a rate like that. And Emily's landlord will require a new qualifying guarantor within a week or the renewal lapses. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. Marcus didn't argue further. By 10 that morning, both withdrawals were filed. I want to be honest with you about something, because I think it matters. I didn't do any of this out of spite. I didn't do it to punish them for the sake of punishing them. I did it because for 27 years, I had been standing behind both of my daughters like an invisible steel beam nobody ever sees, or thanks, holding up their credit, their housing, their whole financial foundation, and they had just stood in a doorway and told me, in no uncertain terms, that they didn't need me hovering over their lives anymore. Fine. I believed them. I decided to give them the closest thing to proof that a father in my position could offer. I didn't hear anything for 2 days, which frankly felt almost peaceful, given everything that had just happened. The same silence that had nearly destroyed me a week earlier now felt like the calmest 48 hours I'd had in months. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at the office reviewing load specifications for a bridge retrofit out near Broken Arrow when my phone lit up with Sophie's name. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "Dad!" Her voice came out tight, clipped, a woman trying very hard to sound calm and failing completely. "There's something wrong with my car loan. The bank says the refinance didn't go through because there's no guarantor on file anymore, and now they're saying my rate's jumping to almost double what I was paying, and if I miss this payment cycle, they're threatening repossession proceedings." "There's no mistake, Sophie," I said, keeping my voice level, almost gentle. "I withdrew as co-signer 2 days ago." Dead silence on the line. "You did what?" "Dad, why would you do that? You know my credit's not strong enough to qualify for this on my own yet. If they repossess that car, it's on my record for 7 years. I need that car for work." "You told me to stay on my own," I said. "So I am." "Dad, please. You have to call them back. Tell them it was some kind of error." "It wasn't an error, Sophie. I'll talk to you soon." I hung up. Emily's call came 4 days later, and it was worse, because Emily has always been the composed one, the one who thinks 3 steps ahead. Hearing her voice actually shake told me everything about how real this had become for her. "Dad, my landlord says the lease renewal is going to lapse because you're no longer listed as guarantor. I don't qualify on my income alone yet, not without a co-signer. They're saying if I can't find a new guarantor in a week, I lose the apartment." "I know," I said. "I ended that arrangement the same day I ended Sophie's. You're doing this on purpose. You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm honoring what you both told me to my face. You said you didn't need me hovering, acting like some kind of hero." So I stopped. "That's not punishment, Emily. That's adulthood." She hung up on me. I sat there in my office for a long moment after that, staring at a blueprint I wasn't really seeing anymore, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not relief, just a strange, quiet clarity, like watching a structure finally settle into the load it was always designed to bear. Over the following 2 weeks, both of their situations collapsed fast. Sophie's car got flagged for repossession before she managed to scrape together a co-signer replacement. Some friend from work who backed out the second she saw the actual numbers involved. The car got taken off a street corner outside her office building on a Tuesday morning while her coworkers watched. Emily's lease lapsed entirely. Her landlord gave her exactly the 7 days the notice promised and not 1 day more, and when she couldn't produce a qualifying guarantor in time, she was served a formal notice to vacate. I heard about the repossession from Marcus, not from Sophie. The bank had contacted him first as a courtesy since his name was still on file from the original paperwork. He called me that afternoon and asked, flat out, if I wanted him to intervene, quietly, no questions asked. No one would ever have to know. I sat with that phone in my hand for a long moment. 27 years of instinct told me to say yes. Every fixer bone in my body wanted to say yes. And then I thought about that doorway in Austin. I thought about my wife's face when Trent told her to leave a party in her own daughter's home. I told Marcus no. Let it happen exactly the way it was going to happen. Here's the thing nobody tells you about being a fixer your whole life. The moment you finally stop fixing, the world doesn't collapse around everyone else. It just becomes honest again. For the first time in years, my daughters were standing in a life built entirely on their own actual footing, and it turned out that footing was a lot thinner than either of them had ever bothered to notice. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I felt nothing when I heard about that repossession truck pulling Sophie's car off a curb in front of people she worked with every day. I felt sick about it for about an hour, and then I remembered her voice in that hallway. Stay on your own. I remembered that she looked me in the eye and told me she'd planned it, watched my calls come in for 3 straight days, and decided on purpose to let her own father suffer, just to prove a point. A car repossession is not cruelty. It's arithmetic. It's exactly what happens to anybody whose name isn't strong enough yet to stand on its own, and mine had been standing in for hers since she was 22 years old. She wanted it gone. I let it go. They showed up at our house in Tulsa, about 3 weeks after that hallway in Austin. They didn't call first. I heard tires on the gravel driveway around 9 at night, headlights sweeping across the living room window, and when I looked out, I saw Sophie's rental car, the one she'd had to get after the repossession, and Emily's sedan pulled up right behind it. And behind both of them, a third car, Trent's. I felt my whole body go tight the second I recognized that third set of headlights. Renee came up beside me at the window, and I heard her breath catch too. Neither one of us said anything. We didn't need to. 29 years of marriage means you can have an entire conversation without a single word passing between you. And the conversation we had standing at that window was simple. Something about tonight was going to be different than a phone call. Now here's a detail I want to be completely honest with you about, because it matters for what happened next. After everything that had unfolded, the lone calls, the panic, the accusations, Renee and I had a conversation about what kind of reaction we might be dealing with if this ever escalated past a phone call. We didn't think our own daughters would show up at our door in anger. But we'd both noticed, over that phone call with Trent weeks earlier, a tone that made us uneasy. So a few days before this night, I'd arranged with a home security patrol service we'd used before for evening monitoring on our property. Nothing dramatic, just a precaution. A car that does a rotation through our neighborhood a couple times a night and can be there inside minutes if called. I stood on our own front porch that night and watched all 3 of them get out of their cars. Sophie was crying before she even reached the steps. Real tears, though it took me a minute to remember that real tears don't automatically mean real accountability. "How could you do this to us?" she said, voice breaking on every other word. "We're your family. You're destroying our lives over one argument at a party." "One argument," I said, my voice entirely empty of the anger I actually felt underneath it. "You watched your mother and me call you for 3 days straight while we were sick with worry, Sophie. You ignored us on purpose to teach me a lesson. Now the world is teaching you one." Emily's face shifted then, grief curdling fast into something uglier, a desperate, cornered kind of panic. "You're just a control freak who can't stand that we don't need you anymore," she snapped, voice echoing off the front of the house. "This is some kind of sick revenge plot because we didn't invite you to one party." I didn't flinch. "I don't want to see either of you fail, but you told me you didn't need me hovering over you, acting like some hero. I'm just honoring your wish. If you truly don't need me, then you don't need my name on your car loan. You don't need my name on your lease. That's not revenge, Emily. That's you finally getting what you asked for." Sophie's voice cracked entirely then, and for one brief second I saw something underneath the anger. Something that looked almost like the little girl who used to run to me every time she scraped a knee in that same driveway. "Dad, please. We didn't mean for it to actually go this far. We were just upset that night. You don't understand what it's like watching everyone else our age get to just live their lives while our parents are calling every single day." I felt that one land, somewhere deep. I won't pretend it didn't. But I thought about the calls I made, the ones that went unanswered for 3 straight days, while I sat in a kitchen in Tulsa convinced I was going to bury one of my own children. I thought about the word purposely, the way both of them had said it to my face like it was something to be proud of. "I understand plenty," I said quietly. "I understand that I called because I loved you both enough to be terrified something had happened to you, and you let me sit in that terror for 3 days because you thought it would teach me a lesson about backing off. There's a difference between wanting space and wanting somebody to suffer to prove a point. You chose the second one. That's when Trent stepped forward, past both of them, right up onto the bottom porch step. And I want to be honest with you, up until that exact moment, I hadn't decided whether I was going to let this conversation happen on the porch or move it back to civil territory somewhere else. But the second his boot hit that step, uninvited, moving toward my front door like he had any claim to walk through it, that decision got made for me. "We're not leaving until you fix this," he said. "You're going to march yourself to that bank tomorrow morning and reverse every single thing you did." "You need to step back off my property," I said, and my voice had changed by then. Not louder, just final. He didn't step back. He reached for the door handle behind me. "I want you to understand something. I have spent my entire life being the calm one, the fixer, the man who doesn't raise his voice. I did not raise my voice that night either. I simply reached into my pocket, pressed one button on my phone, and said 4 words into it. We need you now." Less than 4 minutes later, headlights swept across the driveway. A security vehicle pulled in slow and deliberate, and 2 officers from the patrol service stepped out. I watched Trent's whole posture change the second those lights hit the driveway. I watched Sophie's face go white. I watched Emily take a full step backward off the porch stairs. Like some part of her, even in that moment, understood exactly how far this had gone. "Sir, ma'am," one of the officers said, walking up calm and even. "This is private property, and the homeowner has asked you to leave. We're going to need you to head back to your vehicles now." Trent tried to argue. "This is a family matter. We have every right." "You don't have a right to put your hand on somebody's door without their permission," the officer said. "Let's go." I stood there on my own porch and watched security escort my 2 daughters and a man I barely knew off a property I had built with my own 2 hands, back into the cars they'd driven up in anger, engines starting one after another, headlights swinging back out onto the road and disappearing into the dark. Renee stood behind me in the doorway the entire time, arms crossed, not a single crack in her voice when Emily turned back one last time and screamed something about how we would regret this. "We already regretted plenty," Renee said quietly, more to me than to anyone still close enough to hear it. "This isn't one of those times." They didn't come back that night. They didn't call the next day either, and for the second time in a month, silence from my daughters didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like the first honest quiet that house had held in weeks. I went to see Marcus again the following week, and this time it wasn't about loans or leases. "I want to rewrite the trust," I told him, sliding my coffee aside to make room for the folder he brought. "Completely." He looked up at me over his glasses, the same careful look he'd given me the day I pulled Sophie's co-signature. "How completely?" "If I go first, everything goes to Renee. If she goes first, everything comes to me. And if we're both gone," I paused, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something settle in my chest instead of tear through it. $0 go to the girls. Instead, I want it funding trade school scholarships, specifically for single mothers going back to school while raising kids on their own. Women like my own mother was, working 3 jobs, never once complaining where we could hear it. Marcus didn't ask me to reconsider. He just nodded, made the note, and got to work. My own father was taken from me by a decision he made and never once looked back on. I grew up without him, and I swore my children would never know that particular kind of ache. And somehow, in giving them everything I never had, I raised 2 daughters who took a father who never once missed a moment for granted. My daughters don't need my money. They made that abundantly clear standing in a doorway in Austin, Texas, telling me to stay on my own. But there are women out there right now, working double shifts, raising kids alone, who would trade almost anything for one person in their corner, backing them the way I backed my own girls, for 27 years, without ever once being asked to. My legacy isn't going to the daughters who called security on themselves by trying to force their way into a house that stopped being theirs to walk into uninvited. It's going to people who would actually notice what it cost. Months passed after that. The calls from Sophie and Emily slowed, then stopped almost completely. I heard through an old family friend that they'd moved into a small place together to split rent, somewhere on the outskirts of Austin. No more string lights, no more lease signing parties. Struggling, apparently. Learning the hard way what a monthly budget actually looks like when your name isn't backed by somebody else's signature. I won't lie to you and say it didn't sting to hear that. It did. Some nights it still does. There are still moments, usually late, usually when Renee's already asleep and the house has gone quiet the way it always does now, where I catch myself picking up my phone just to look at an old photo. Sophie at 6 years old on my shoulders at the state fair, cotton candy smeared across both our faces. Emily at 8, standing in the driveway in her Halloween costume, missing her front tooth, grinning up at the camera like the whole world was made just for her. I look at those photos and some part of me, some stubborn, foolish, fatherly part of me, wants to call the bank tomorrow morning and undo every single thing I did. I want to tell you that part of me is completely gone. It isn't. I don't think it ever will be. That's what having children does to you. It carves out a piece of you that stays soft, no matter how much the rest of you has to harden. But every time that ache creeps back in, I remember the hallway. I remember Stay on Your Own. I remember watching my wife's face fall apart over a set of china that never got its moment. I remember Trent's hand on my front door, and headlights sweeping across my own driveway, because my daughters brought a stranger to force his way into a house I built with my own 2 hands. And the ache settles right back down where it belongs. Not gone, never gone, but quiet enough that I can still get up the next morning and go to work, still get up the next morning and be a husband to the woman who never once asked me to choose between fixing things and being honest. A friend of mine, another father I've known since our kids were in grade school together, asked me a few weeks back if I regretted any of it, if I'd do it differently knowing how it turned out. I told him the truth. I told him I regret exactly one thing. I regret that it took me 27 years and one silent car ride home from Austin to understand that love without limits doesn't raise grateful children. It raises children who've never once had to notice what anything costs. I don't regret the withdrawal. I don't regret the trust. I don't regret standing on my own porch and watching a man who tried to force his way into my house get walked back to his car by somebody I called. I regret that I didn't understand any of this sooner, back when there might have still been time to do it differently, gently, before it had to happen this way at all. Renee and I sit out on our back porch most evenings now, right around sunset, coffee in hand, watching the sky do its slow fade over the same Tulsa backyard where 2 little girls once learned to ride bikes I stayed up half the night assembling. She reached over one evening not too long ago and put her hand on mine, the same way she's done 1,000 times over 29 years, and I looked at her and realized something simple and true. My father left when I was 9 years old. I spent my whole life trying to become the man he never gave himself the chance to be. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the only person I truly needed to protect was the woman who'd been sitting right beside me the entire time. She never once asked me to choose between being generous and being honest with myself. She just waited, patiently, for 29 years, for me to notice that the same hands I'd used to build a career and a house and 2 daughters' entire futures had never once been used to build something just for the 2 of us. We're building that now, slowly. A trip to the coast we keep talking about, and finally booked for the fall. Sunday mornings where neither one of us checks a phone before 9. Small things. The kind of things I never let myself have time for while I was busy being everyone's steel beam. My daughters have their own lives now. They made that crystal clear, standing in a doorway in Austin. And my wife and I, we have each other, and it turns out that is more than enough. If this one hit for you, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'll see you on the next one.